and we'll be recording today's meeting. So welcome everybody to the April WOCAP Steering Committee. Hope everybody is well. As I said, please sign in, and you can add any questions or comments that you have for us. And our agenda for today is packed. That's why we're going to get started, and we're going to kind of keep this moving because our presentations are quite impacted. And so we're going to keep this thing moving. We're going to do a roll call. We've got a co-leads report, follow up from Miss Margaret and Brian. Then we have a couple of presentations, one from Carb on rules in WOCAP, and then we've got an agency enforcement presentation by Carb, BACMed, and the city of Oakland. We've got different enforcement strategies there. We're going to start with Ms. Margaret, and welcome.
Well, hello, everyone. Good to see y'all that y'all made it like I did. I had to make a pit stop before I got here to say goodbye to Veronica Cummings, who has been instrumental and stuff with West Oakland, especially around the Howard Terminal project and the community benefits agreement.
Awesome. I want to say a little bit about the clean air event.
Okay. We finally got our first off the ground institutional indoor filtration project at the St. Mary's Center. And we had over 75 people there because I served close to 75 servings of gumbo. And that it was, we had staff, official staff from Skinner's office and Assemblywoman Bonta's office, and also had staff, the president of the board of directors for the Bay Area Air Quality. It was very successful. Everybody seemed to enjoy themselves. They asked me to come back again to do some more cooking. It was very inspiring. And I got a recent email saying that they're very appreciative of having the heat and the air filtration inside of the St. Mary's Center.
Awesome. Thanks. We've got pretty much everybody here. So before we move any further, we're going to do our roll call for our steering committee members. And if you can just let us know that you're here. Richard Grow.
Here.
Kalila Haynes. Matt Heft.
Here.
Sony Johnson. Kate Lefkowitz. Rita Look. Steve Lowe. Alverdia Owens. OCDOT representative, either Colin or Selena.
Here. Colin here.
Yeah. Okay, great. Environmental Defense Fund, either Fern or Maria. David Woolley. Brandon Reed.
Present.
Melissa, I'm sorry if I get your name wrong. Houchin.
Hi, I'm here.
Did I get your name right?
Yes, you did.
Great. Veronica Cole.
I'm here.
Paul Grazzini.
Here.
Bruce Tudor.
I'm here.
May Colcord.
Here.
Scott Andrews.
Hello.
All right. Great. Thank you all. We are going to move directly into our tracker tool discussion.
Thanks, Randolph. Welcome, everyone. Happy April. So I know many of you have spent a lot of time on WOP's website looking at the strategies, right? Huge update to the website is that now actually on the landing page, you can see all 89 strategies in one place. Before it was filtered for you, right? So you would have the 4 categories of land use, health and living buffers, port and freight, and bike, walking, transit. But now, right, you can see all of them in one place and scroll at your convenience, which we're hoping makes browsing a little bit easier for you. Thanks, Jess, for dropping that link. So please take a look when you get the chance, and happy browsing.
Great. Any questions about the tracking tool? All right, we're going to move. We want to welcome Diana from the district, Diana Ruiz. You want to say a few words?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Just thank you for welcoming me on the call, and really excited to for this presentation this evening, for the multiple presentations this evening. And I'm the new community engagement manager at the Air District in the community engagement division, and I started at the beginning of this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Diana. All right, we've got a follow-up from the previous meeting. We've got some Zoom report results here.
Hey everyone, Beth here. And last month, for those of you who were here, we did a live Zoom poll asking what policy areas or projects you would like to get involved with this year. And we wanted to use those non-scientific results to help guide the planning of our agendas for the coming months. And so here you can see we have both the STEP grant and the truck management work tied for #1. They got the most votes, although the number of votes wasn't huge. I think 20 people or so voted. Then we have Healthy Home Air Initiative, air filters work that also was popular, Prescott Greening and General Plan, 2 separate items, both tied for the 3rd most common number of votes. And then Sustainable Port and Electrification Master Plan, those things were 4th. Building electrification at the city's initiative for that, and then frontage road. So all these things got multiple votes, so it's not like no one's interested in frontage road, but based on this, we will try and be focusing more on the things that are kind of in the top half of the list in the coming months. But of course, as things change, new opportunities arise, we will take that into consideration. And we also encourage all of you, especially steering committee members, to reach out to us when there are WOCAP related issues that you want discussed at meetings. We want the steering committee to kind of be active in helping us plan these agendas. So next slide. And Brian, I see your comment that the slides are out of focus on your screen, and I also am seeing them out of focus. So Randolph, I have no idea if there's any way for you to fix that, but if not, I'm happy to share my screen.
That is very odd.
They're just kind of fuzzy looking.
Any better?
Worse.
No.
Wow.
Maybe try stop sharing and reshare your screen. It's strange. I'm not seeing them out of focus. So it sounds like some folks are having issues and some aren't.
Yeah, I've checked with a few other people. A few other people were seeing them fuzzy.
Yeah.
but I did put the link to the slides in the chat. So if anyone's having
That looks a little better.
trouble seeing them,
Great.
Gremlins.
Here's the slides again. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving because I want to make sure we have time for all of our guest speakers. So as part of that meeting, before, during, and after the meeting, people had the opportunity to respond to a Survey Monkey that we put together to ask about our inactive or not started strategies, or strategies with a not started status. So there were about 9 of them. The 3 that kind of had the most excitement and activity around them were further study measure 4 for BACMed, excuse me. And this was kind of work around addressing odors, health-related emissions, so things that really impact people's quality of life. And this is from the East Bay Mud Facility. So people were able to put in notes on how they wanted to get involved. So this is kind of an Air District CARB, East Bay Mud combined responsible. So a representative from CARB, Julia, said she would be willing to help identify funding opportunities to kind of kickstart things. East Bay Mud is able and willing. So we will kind of follow up and set up meetings to explore what kind of work can be done to kind of start moving along. And then BACMed further study measure 6, there was a lot of interest because that was to work with the port on optimizing their appointment system to minimize truck idling, which we know is a huge contributor to air quality issues. And Julia again offered to try and help facilitate a meeting to between the Air District and CARB freight staff. Caltrans also kind of volunteered to help work on this, as an East Bay Mud. So note that we will be following up with you folks who kind of volunteered. And then this strategy 76 hasn't really come up a lot in the work, but a lot of people were interested in seeing what could be done around this. It's a little broad. So the state has a health and all policies program, and this strategy is calling for the city of Oakland to implement that framework into the work. So Zwen and Lily from OEHA will follow up with them since they're marked in the plan as kind of the leads, but also the Oakland Planning Department folks are listed. And so we'll try and connect people to see how especially the general plan is able to incorporate the health and all policies frame. Next slide. And if you have questions about any of these things, throw them in the chat and I'll try and respond afterwards. So next slide, Randolph. Oh, sorry, you have it up there. So planning code amendments. So the city recently adopted their new housing element, and as part of the process, the city prepared planning code amendments to implement the housing element. And those set of amendments include language that's directly related to our WOCAP implementation work to reduce impacts from heavy-duty truck-related businesses. So if these amendments pass as they're currently written, this is going to be a huge win for the WOCAP process and all the work of this committee. There was an initial meeting on March 15th. We sent out an email encouraging folks to kind of speak out and support. I don't think we got much action from people interested, but we have many other opportunities in the coming months for this group to kind of speak out and support. And so we want to hear from you how we can support you all in doing that, because we want to make sure that the city kind of passes these things. So if people are interested in kind of getting support from us in either letter writing or speaking at public meetings, please let us know. And Nicole and Alicia and I and others can help support you all and give you whatever kind of talking points or coaching you need to make that happen. So
So Beth, I
Yes.
just want to put a clear question to the group. We can say, yeah, reach out to us later, but you'll all forget.
Yes.
But this is where the rubber meets the road as a steering committee. This is where you say, yes, I will commit. Get in touch with me. Tell me how to do it, right? These are your strategies. They've been incorporated into a major public policy document that will last for 30 years. So this is the time to take action.
And we will, I'm gonna keep a running list of things to follow up with everyone in an email in the next day or two. So I will put this in here as a, we need a couple volunteers to be on call to go to these meetings and speak in support. So next,
Hi.
oh, yes.
This is Awele, drama teacher at Skyline High School. I have 3 students who I shared at the last steering committee
Oh,
meeting
yeah.
that are doing research in air quality. And one of the things that they need to get done in the next week or 2 is their civic action. And so if you need support
Ooh.
with your letter writing campaign,
Great.
they can help take that over with some of the other students in our senior capstone research class. They may be on this
That's-
call. I'm on the phone, so
Mhm.
I'm not on the computer to check and see. But Gnarly, Nicole, and Melanie have been there.
That's awesome. And right after Beth's presentation, I'm going to put up the sign-in sheet again for those who've come later, and then please actually put that in the. You can either text us or chat us, or all right, Beth.
This was the information just to pass on to your students. It was the email we sent out with the call to action. But we'll follow up over email. So the final update we have for you, it's been a very busy month on our end, is that the environmental justice element of the general plan, the public draft was released, the 90-day comment period started, and it goes through June 22nd. And so we have a proposed focus of the May steering committee meeting to go through the parts of the EJ element together that connect to our WOCAP strategies. And if there's interest, we can have additional meetings outside of the steering committee to more deeply dive into the EJ element in order to craft a comment letter from the steering committee. So if folks are interested in that, you can throw your information in the chat that you're interested, or respond to an email that we'll send out with follow-up items after the meeting. So I think that's all, but I will pause because that was a lot there.
Mhm.
And I think we have like maybe 4 minutes for any
Yeah,
comments or
Got a
questions
little
about
time.
this.
Do we have any comments or questions?
Ms. Margaret's hand is up.
Mhm.
I would just want to let people remember that we do have a community engagement process for the general plan, but deeply rooted.
Yes.
And people want to be involved in understanding that part of the Oakland general plan. Please contact Beth or I.
All right, great. And Beth, you see that Brent.
Yes, I got
As,
it. I have my notepad writing down everyone who's
Gotcha.
interested.
And please also, because we go through the sign-in sheet later too, just to capture all the comments there as well. So thanks. Any more questions or comments? Great. We are going to move to our CARB regulations presentation. We're going to start with Hanji.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is Hanjiro. I work at the California Air Resources Board in the Office of Community Air Protection. Normally, I know that you all hear from Julia. She's out this week, and I'm trying to, step in a little bit and fill her shoes. I have a background, though, in a lot of this, in the technical work across a lot of these programs, and so I'm excited tonight, to come in response to requests from the CSE to provide an update on a handful of CARB regulations that are implicated in strategies in the WOCAP. Can I have the next slide, please? So before I dig into tonight's update, I wanted to take a step back and explain a bit more about CARB's role in reducing emissions and working with other agencies. And then I'll shift into a deeper dive into a couple of specific WOCAP CARB regulatory strategies that are related to port, reducing emissions at the port and addressing heavy-duty trucks. So in addition to today's presentation, we have staff available for questions and answers. We've tried to leave some time at the end of this presentation for questions and answers, as well as at the end of the meeting today. And so I'm going to try, because I know we have a packed agenda, I'm going to try and move quickly and succinctly through these slides as well as I can. So CARB works collaboratively with our federal and local partners on the development and implementation of measures to reduce pollution. CARB specifically has a mandate to regulate mobile sources of air pollution and greenhouse gases and consumer products. But CARB works with air districts to administer incentive programs and which accelerate the deployment of cleaner technologies, and as well works obviously collaboratively with our partners. Next slide, please. So CARB has three main tools in the strategy toolbox when it comes to tackling pollution issues. And those are developing new regulations. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about in this presentation. And so new regulations or regulations set limits or other standards. They essentially set the floor for what's available. Incentives are carrots that accelerate the deployment of new technologies. Enforcement actions, which you'll hear about a little bit later from my colleague, Helena Rim, also at CARB, as well as some district enforcement measures, ensure that regulations are effective at reducing emissions over the long run. We can move to the next slide, please. So there are a number of strategies in the WOCAP which implicate or intersect with CARB regulatory programs. As I mentioned, I'm here tonight in response to a specific request from the community regarding an update on regulations related to reducing emissions around the port, namely amendments to the at-berth regulation, commercial hovercraft regulation, and as well as measures that target heavy-duty trucks. So these relate to some of the strategies that I'll list on the slides that are coming up. So as quick as I could move through that first part, let's dive a little deeper into some of these measures. Okay, so last year, CARB adopted amendments to the commercial hovercraft regulation. Commercial hovercraft are defined as any vessel that's operating in commercial activity, so it includes ferries and tugboats, barges, and cruise excursion vessels. But commercial hovercraft typically use multiple engines on board, and the original commercial hovercraft regulation, which started in 2009, mandated Tier 2 and Tier 3 engines. These amendments to the commercial hovercraft regulation expand the vehicle categories to include commercial fishing and sport fishing, and as well require vessel owners who are engaged in commercial activity to upgrade to the cleanest available technology. So that's Tier 3 or Tier 4 engines and installing diesel particulate filters. So moving to Tier 4 and or a diesel particulate filter is a big jump in emissions control. It's about a 90% reduction in PM, 85% overall in PM and NOx. And so these are some of the best available technologies for reducing emissions. The amendments also provided some additional stringency for vessels operating around disadvantaged communities. And there are several compliance pathways available. Can I have the next slide, please? So, I think we missed one. Yeah, here we go. So this regulation is already in effect, and it was effective January 1st. The first compliance dates are scheduled for December, and the renewable diesel reporting deadline was just a couple days ago. If you are interested, that was a lot of details, I know, about this regulation, and it was just scratching the surface. So if you're interested in learning more, we have the program staff for the Commercial Hovercraft have created a number of fact sheets, which really break down specific dimensions of this program. So I encourage you to check them out and look on a little more. We'll be conducting a technology review, which will have additional reporting available starting next year. If you want to stay up to date with any of the programs I'm going to talk about tonight, a couple of ways to do so. One is you can go to CARB's website and you can click on subscribe, and you can subscribe to program emails. You can just subscribe to everything, or you can try to make specific picks. If you have specific questions, though, feel free to email program staff directly. For Commercial Hovercraft, it's harborcraft@arb.ca.gov. Let's keep moving to the next slide. Great. So in 2020, CARB adopted amendments to the at-birth regulation, which expanded the original 2007 at-birth regulation, which added more vessel visits and excluded some new vessel categories, namely auto carriers and tankers that visit terminals. This includes the types of ocean-going vessels that are included in this regulation include container ships, reefers, cruise ships. So those refrigerated cargo ships, cruise ships, auto carriers, and tanker vessels. This regulation as well has some phase-ins for its emissions reduction requirements. The regulation is often referred to as the shore power regulation, meaning that the primary goal of this regulation is to require the use of shore power, also sometimes referred to as cold ironing. Essentially, it's running often a large extension cable out to the ships so that those ships don't have their auxiliary engines running while they're at berth. The regulation allows ships, vessels, and terminals to work together collaboratively to reduce emissions and ensure that emissions reductions meet the goals. As I said, there's some phased-in implementation starting this year. Let's move on to the next slide. So there was an interim report published in December, which provides a much deeper dive into the at-berth regulation and the amendments that were adopted. There were some key recommendations from the report, which were to further direction to reduce emissions from vessels during transiting, maneuvering, and anchoring. That's a significant source of emissions from vessels in the port. And CARB staff are, and we understand that there was a desire to include bulk ships in the 2020 amendments to the at-berth regulation. And while CARB staff, did not recommend the inclusion of bulk vessels at this time, they are currently considering what future measures and actions can be taken to achieve additional emissions reductions from vessels, including bulk ships, while at berth, transit, maneuvering, and at berth. So once again, how to get involved, subscribe to program emails, please reach out, shorepower@arb.ca.gov. Program staff would be absolutely love to hear from you, and we always value your input. Let's keep moving to slide 10. Excellent. Okay, so CARB has developed a portfolio of regulatory measures to simultaneously reduce emissions from existing heavy-duty vehicles, as well as accelerate the transition to zero-emission vehicles. So CARB currently is implementing a new smog check program for trucks, the heavy-duty inspection and maintenance program, where owners will be forced to or be required to submit emissions data in order to register their vehicles. But some of the biggest pushes on the regulation side from CARB are towards the adoption of zero-emission vehicles, or ZEVs, or ZE trucks. So many folks might be aware of the Advanced Clean Truck regulation, which will require an increasing percentage of medium and heavy-duty trucks or vehicles sold in California to be ZEVs starting in 2024. Ramping up to 75% by 2035. As a complement to this measure, CARB is also developing the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation, which would help accelerate sales to 100%. And so the big, some of the big pieces here, just to pay attention, is that with the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation is the focus on drayage trucks, because we know that one of the most important categories is drayage. So the first compliance date for drayage trucks, the proposed regulation is 2024, and that they must all be electric by 2035. They've had one board meeting for the ACF already. The comment period is open for a couple more days on the last proposed reg. Any stakeholders, please. I know that program staff is very interested from hearing from you. Next slide, please. So part of the request for the update tonight, in addition to the Advanced Clean Trucks and Advanced Clean Fleets rules, was regarding the 2010 truck and bus rule, or truck and bus regulations. So beginning back in 2008, CARB was started to reduce toxic diesel particulates and small particulates found in diesel exhaust by regulating trucks and buses, to require them to have newer model year engines. And so the truck and bus rule recently became fully implemented, which requires all trucks to have a 2010 or newer model year engine. And to ensure that these regulations are enforced, CARB works with the DMV to ensure that they check compliance with the regulation prior to issuing the registration for the vehicle. Keep moving to the next slide. So as I said, some of these regulations have already been adopted, the at-birth amendments and the Advanced Clean Trucks. This year, CARB will be hearing, the board will be hearing, again, the proposed Advanced Clean Fleets rule, as well as regulations related to addressing in-use locomotives. And there's a lot of items on CARB's board calendar. One great way is to get ahead on here, and we can look at some of these measures and make sure that you have an opportunity to make your voice heard. Next slide. So as I said, lots of contact information available. We have program staff here tonight to address any questions, and I'm happy to answer questions myself. My email is here at the bottom of the slide. Feel free to email Julia as well. She's your normal contact, I know, for West Oakland, or you can email us at communityair@arb.ca.gov. So that concludes my main presentation, and hopefully we can shift to a couple questions.
Thanks a bunch of incredible information. Thanks a lot, Hanji. Do we have any questions? Ryan?
Yeah, I didn't want to go first, but yeah, thank you. It's a terrific presentation. I appreciate the update. I do have one question on the bulk carriers. So going back a little in history here, because that's what I have is history. I think around 2010, when the first shore power regs were being rolled out, the bulk carriers begged for more time to get ready. And it seems like it's 13 years later and they still aren't ready for some reason. Can you give us some sense of why staff is not recommending that bulk carriers be included in the shore power reg in this late date?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's a program staff on tonight who can help address this question as well. Nicole, I see popping up. I do know that there are some unique challenges and complexities and operational constraints with bulk carriers, which are a challenge. So maybe Nicole, I don't know if you have anything you can add.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on it, Hanjiro. When we looked at, I was not involved with the original shore power regulation, I will say, but with the 2020 updates, bulk carriers, we did take a hard look at them. And there are, as Hanjiro mentioned, a lot of operational constraints with the bulk vessels as far as trying to use shore power or a capture and control system even. A lot of the ships, it just to use them, these ships often shift back and forth at berth, and they're called line hauling vessels. And so it's difficult to actually get emissions reductions from them at berth. It's the same reason that at anchor was not included. What we would like to do is include them in some sort of future in transit regulation that would get the most reductions possible from bulk vessels, and then would also get reductions from other vessels as well.
Yeah. And go ahead.
What would that look like? An in-transit regulation? What would that look like?
Yeah, at this point, we're so early. I don't know what that will look like. We're in right now just trying to explore what kind of measures we could do. There's always, we have to talk with EPA, you know, what is our authority to reduce vessel emissions in transit? But that is sort of our next big area that we want to tackle, because emissions from these ocean going vessels in transit is really where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck.
And I know that CARB is putting together a technology assessment, pardon me, Brian, as well over the next year and a half, thinking about strategies. And part of that will be looking at alternative fuels, which is a big focus from the international shipping and bulk shipping community on maybe one way to address it. So hopefully there'll be some solutions regarding that.
Okay, I just want to emphasize that 13 years is a long time to have an industry say, oh, we can't do it. It's too hard. They've had 13 years to figure out how to do it, right? And this particular industry has continued to say it's too hard. Everybody else is biting a bullet and figuring out how to do it. And so we would hope that CARB would be as stringent in that particular industry as they are on everybody else at the Port of Oakland. Because it'll benefit the people of Richmond, but those same bulk carriers park out there downwind of us, every day, and I'm sure they're using onboard auxiliary generators to operate. So I think this is a really important issue for communities. It's probably not a super well understood one, and so you're typically getting big NGOs and a whole bunch of industry people talking to you. But this is one place where we really need to be emphasizing that the people on the ground have been waiting for a long time for something to happen in the bulk carrier industry. So I won't pick on you anymore. I just want to make sure that years go by and people are still waiting for relief.
Okay, we've just got a few minutes before we're going to have to move to Helena's presentation. So I just saw a Willie pop up, but Miss Margaret and Richard, and of course you can always put your comments in the chat as well.
Okay, I'm not. Thank you for the update, but I'm not understanding how did CARB or California push the change of the fuel transition from sulfur fuel to non-sulfur fuel 49 miles outside of California. And you mean to tell me we still have to put up with the exhaust or emissions from the bulk ships, and it should have been all that should be at one package. There's no way. Why are we still catering to the bulk ships when we already know you can do the fuel changes, but we can't do the show power? That don't make any sense.
Want to respond real quick, Anji? Or no?
Yeah, I don't know if Nicole has anything to add. I would think it's a good point.
It is a good point. I will say the one thing with shore power on the bulk vessels, the difficult thing is sometimes bulk vessels will only come to California once in their entire life. Most don't come repeatedly to California. So if you'd have to put shore power on every single bulk vessel in the world, essentially, to be able to effectively utilize shore power. So that's one of the difficult things with bulk vessels. But I do hear you and I understand.
Great. Richard?
My question for CARB, I guess, is whether anybody anywhere in the world is dealing with this sector. I mean, what's the real barrier here? Is it really nobody at any port is actually managing with the bulk, this kind of operation effectively, or is it just a cost thing? And just to, I guess what I'm really getting at is, I think we all deserve an answer to that. If not tonight, I would really like to know, what is the state of technology anywhere in the world? And if not, if we're not doing that here, why not?
Yeah, California is one of the only places in the world that requires shore power. The European Union is working on requiring it for container, passenger cruise and refrigerated cargo vessels as well, kind of copying our at-berth regulation. But as far as we're aware, there's no requirement for any bulk vessels to plug into shore power anywhere else.
All right, can we get one more quick one from Awele? Awele? Okay, we're gonna move. We've got a presentation. We're gonna bring on Helena from CARB for a presentation on enforcement.
Hi, Randolph. I'll go ahead and give a brief introduction. So hi, everyone. I'm Alicia, and I see my camera's a little, I'm not going to worry about it. So good evening. I'm Alicia Parker with BACMed and with the Air District. And I want to give you a little introduction to tonight's, we're shifting gears now. We just heard from CARB about their 2023 rules update, and now we're going to talk about enforcement. As we move into the enforcement part of the agenda, we want to talk about the connection between environmental justice and enforcement, excuse me. And we want to, so why should we care about enforcement and what is enforcement? Next slide. The definition of environmental justice calls out the enforcement of environmental regulations as being, sort of central to environmental justice. We're really keying in the next few slides to the what is meant by the term environmental regulations. And so we'll dig a little bit more into the environmental regulations piece of the enforcement. Next. And environmental regulations exist in this context, in the air quality context, to minimize emissions and exposure to pollution. The table highlights relative toxicity and emissions associated with various industries. This is meant to illuminate why it is important to enforce rules that protect health and risk associated with industry and goods movement. Next slide. Well, I wanted to provide you with some examples of environmental regulations. So these are, legislative proposals. They get approved at various levels of government, whether it's the state legislature, whether it's the BACMed board of directors, or whether it's your local city council. These are examples of different, levels of government shaping environmental regulations. And all of these regulations are enforceable. And you'll see examples tonight of proactive enforcement as well as complaint-based enforcement. Next slide. And so we are here to kind of assert that the literature widely supports the enforcement, that enforcement is a tool to achieve environmental justice, particularly when we're talking about addressing incompatibilities between industrial uses and housing. And then, sort of the opposite of that, it would be that without enforcement, it's possible for increased harm. Okay, so enforcement is very, very important in the kind of control of harm. And the slide kind of gives some examples, whether that's a parking ticket to a heavy duty truck that's parking in a residential neighborhood, or whether that's the enforcement of permit regulations from a quote permitted source. Okay, yes, next slide, please. And I want to underscore that the take-home message tonight is that the steering committee and members of the community have a role in strengthening enforcement efforts in West Oakland and in Oakland. Next slide. And so tonight's objectives are to update the steering committee on enforcement actions and enforcement related data. This is part of our plan for 2023, where we would have 2 meetings per year to talk about enforcement. We want to give the steering committee and the wider community information so they can be active participants in reporting violations. And we also want to reinforce the importance of the community's role in supporting enforcement work. we admit that there is a lot of information tonight. Okay, we have 3 different jurisdictions here to give you information. And what I want you to think about as you're going through as you're hearing these presentations is, do you understand what rule is being enforced? Do you understand how the rule is enforced? Do you understand the data being presented? Does the data that's being presented match your lived experience? Okay, we want to hear from you, because we might have information about truck parking tickets that's, maybe it shows us only 2 tickets were issued in the last 6 months, but because on your block, there's been countless trucks parking. We want to hear that tonight. And we also want you to know about how you would report something.
Right.
And so Randolph has a flyer related to that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I'll share that. We pulled together a 1-pager on enforcement with all the contacts, and I'll share that in the chat. And thanks so much for that overview. And then we're gonna move to Helena. Thanks, Alicia. Oh, can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
sorry about that. I've had
No
technical difficulties. All right, so I'm Helena Rim. I'm in CARB's Enforcement Division, and I'll be providing a high-level overview of CARB's enforcement and our enforcement activities from 2022 in the West Oakland community. So CARB enforcement strives to achieve CARB's mission through fair, consistent, and comprehensive enforcement of our regulations. We work in partnership with other divisions in CARB, other enforcement agencies, and with communities to ensure emissions reductions envisioned during the adoption of these regulations are actually achieved in practice. Next slide, please. So our enforcement process includes both field inspections and audits. Field inspections, for field inspections, we collaborate with air districts, California Highway Patrol, and other state agencies to conduct inspections on ships, at rail yards, and fuel refineries, and to conduct roadside inspections of heavy-duty diesel trucks at border crossings, at California Highway Patrol, way stations, fleet facilities, or at stationary sources such as factories or refineries. We also deploy the Portable Emissions Acquisition System, or PEACS, and we'll play a quick video that provides an overview of the PEACS tool in the next slide. We also conduct area-focused investigations, which is an approach to concentrate enforcement in AB 617 and other overburdened communities, including communities surrounding freight hubs and distribution centers. And then we also respond to complaints from the public, such as reports regarding idling or smoking vehicles or other air pollution complaints. And then there are audits, both on-site audits of actual equipment units and audits of submitted reports to make sure that emissions limits are being met. Next slide, please. This is the quick about 1 minute video on PEACS.
Characterizing the emissions of vehicles as they move across the state is challenging. The California Air Resources Board has found that a small fraction of on-road heavy-duty vehicles with excess emissions contributes to the majority of particulate and nitrogen oxide pollution. The Portable Emission Acquisition System, or PEACS, is a roadside emission measurement system that captures a portion of a passing vehicle's exhaust as it drives through. PEACS determines an emission snapshot for each passing vehicle in real time and pairs that information with searchable license plate data collected by an automated license plate reader. The system can be used for research, modeling, and identifying high-emitting vehicles for enforcement. The encrypted data is transferred to CARB's secure servers for analysis and can be used in various ways. Here are some examples of heavy-duty trucks passing through the system. As you can see, it's unobtrusive and takes seconds to collect the data and determine the fuel-based emissions factor. For more information, visit our website at arb.ca.gov.
Awesome.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to move into the summary of enforcement activities in 2022 and 2021 here. So in support of strategy number 60 in the WOCAP that aims to reduce ship emissions at birth, We've continued to audit and inspect fleets at the Port of Oakland. And in 2021, CARB audited 10 shore power fleets that made a total of 735 visits to the Port of Oakland. And a shore power fleet is any company with a container, passenger, or refrigerated cargo vessels that make 25 or more visits to a regulated port, regardless of how many ships they have in their fleet. The audits we conduct are based on annual reports from the previous year, which is why right now we can report 2021 data and are currently reviewing 2022 data. And we review the fleet visits reported to us along with backup documentation to determine compliance. And we validate this data to make sure that the reports that the fleets are sending us are accurate. And we do this by cross-checking the fleet submitted visit data with Wharfinger data that the ports are required to report to us to check for visit accuracy. And if there are any instances of emergencies or delays, fleets are required to submit supporting documentation to substantiate their claims. So overall, for 2021, the regulation required an 80% reduction of shore power, and the fleets visiting the Port of Oakland had a compliance power reduction of 83%. And Hanjiro had it in his slide as well, but I've included the shore power email here in case you have any questions specific to shore power enforcement. And next slide, please. So moving on to heavy duty vehicle enforcement, ongoing commitments focused on diesel trucks in the WOCAP include increasing the frequency of inspections with guidance from the community and achieving compliance with the truck and bus regulation. And as part of this effort, CARB has continued to deploy the PEAKS tool, the Portable Emissions Acquisition System, and conduct roaming vehicle inspections and fleet audits in West Oakland. And most recently in 2022, we conducted 174 inspections, excuse me, across various heavy-duty truck programs, as you see listed here. Most of the inspections were conducted at the intersection of 3rd and Chestnut Street, which is near the port, where we deployed the PEAKS tool, and which I will summarize in the next slide. And we also had a few roadside inspections conducted around West Grand Avenue and Adeline Street. So you see that we have the total number of citations here. When a citation is issued to a vehicle in the field, CARB citations unit makes sure to find the proper owner, then send them a letter with instructions on how they can clear the citation, along with a due date for providing or submitting proof of correction. This timeline can vary depending on the citation. It's typically 30 days, but can be longer. And they're also required to pay a monetary penalty, which again varies depending on the program. And proof of compliance can be, for example, a copy of the invoice from the engine dealer that clearly shows that a new label has been installed. Sorry, was there a comment or question? Okay. A copy of the invoice for an emissions control label citation, or a passing opacity test for an excessive smoke citation. And then if the truck owner does not provide proof of compliance, they may be subject to additional enforcement actions such as denials of registration renewals or court action. And we do offer the diesel hotline, which is shown here at the bottom left, which truck owners can call to talk to one of our experts about compliance options. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of the PEAKS deployment that I mentioned that we conducted in August and October of last year. And as a reminder, the overall goal of this tool is to flag potentially high emitting trucks that would be subject to further inspections via roadside or follow-up. Oh, sorry, can you go back? Thank you. So across the two deployments, we screened a total of 691 heavy-duty diesel trucks, identified 7 potential high emitters, and pulled over 60 trucks for further inspections and issued 5 citations. These inspections and citations fall within the total that I had shown in the previous slide. And this is just a map of the location of the PEAKS deployment and our coordination with the CHP to set the device up along the street in a safe manner. Next slide, please. All right, so If you have any specific air pollution concerns, you can report it to CARB or to the Air Quality District. Typically, concerns related to stationary sources such as odor, dust, smoke, or asbestos issues would be reported to the district, and issues with mobile diesel-powered vehicles would be reported through CARB or to CARB through the Cal EPA complaint system, which I have linked here at the top. So complaints regarding potentially illegally idling trucks can be reported to both agencies, but the district can typically respond faster since they do have staff available on call on the ground in West Oakland to be able to respond and investigate incidents. It's helpful to include the information that I have included here, such as the specific address or cross street rather than the general neighborhood where you saw your concern, the potential source of emissions, for example, the name of the facility, company, or person, your contact information so that an inspector can get additional details on your complaint and be able to follow up with you once the complaint has been resolved, and then whether or not this is a persistent and ongoing issue. And there isn't a specific timeline to follow up with complaints, but we do our best to respond within the same or next day if the complaint was submitted during business hours, and to get back to them by email or phone if contact information was provided once the complaint has been resolved. And then if they're submitted outside of business hours or during the weekend, we work to address them the following business day. And I'll just emphasize that the information you provide to us and the district is really invaluable because both agencies rely on communities to identify pollution sources and locations of concern, since we're not always on the ground to see what's happening. So you're our eyes and ears many times, and without your input, we may otherwise not know about the problem. And then last but not least, on the right side of the slide, I have the Enforcement Data Visualization System, or the EDVS tool. So it's stated in the WOCAP that we are committed to enhance the quality of enforcement data for the West Oakland community. And to that end, we continue to improve and update this EDVS tool, that maps out enforcement activities such as field inspections, case settlements for heavy duty vehicles and equipment, and allows users to look at enforcement actions in specific regions or AB 617 communities like West Oakland, shown here on the screen. And I'll link to the EDVS tool and a flyer on how to use it in the chat. And that's the end of my presentation. I have my email here. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And as Hanjiro said, also, please feel free to reach out to Julia as well. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a bunch, Helena. Bunch of incredible information. Again, I saw Miss Margaret's up, but we had a question from the CAC member, Hannah Mendoza. Do you see that these are frequent flyers, so to speak, the operators that make up the bulk of the citations, or does it vary?
I don't have an answer to that now, but I would say it varies. Warren Hawkins, my manager, is here. I don't know if you can speak to that.
I think not being out in the field with the diesel team that perform the inspections, but I believe from talking with them that it varies from inspection to inspection. And if they do find frequent companies that come through, then they'd be a target for obviously enforcement and repair of those vehicles.
Right.
Sorry. Hi. I think it was Jess asked that question.
Yes, that's a yeah.
Yes, good question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, we do have CAC member Hannah Mendoza in the room.
How you doing?
All right.
Good.
Miss Margaret. We need you need to unmute.
Okay, there are gaps in enforcement here. After 5 o'clock, who is supposed to be on the streets to be doing enforcement? Who has what authority? Before 5 a.m., who has that authority of enforcement? During the time between 12 PM and 1 o'clock when the ILWU workers go on break and the trucks are filling in to the gates to get inside and I'm queuing up on the streets of the Port of Oakland, who has what the authority to make sure they're not idling? I, in my 20 plus years, have never seen a officer out at that time of the day doing any type of traffic enforcement. So there's a big gap here at certain times of the day where no agency is doing this work around enforcement.
Yeah, so I can't speak to the city or district. Oh, well, I believe for the district, they do have on-call staff who are available or should be available 24/7 outside
No, they
of
don't
business
know.
hours.
No, nope, 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 nope. They do not work after 5 o'clock.
Alicia,
Please show me one citation that an officer of Barrier Quality gave somebody a citation after 5 o'clock and before 5 a.m. Somebody.
Yeah, hi, Ms. Margaret. This is Warren with CARB. Yeah, you're right. Our folks do typically work the hours of 7 to 4, 8 to 5. When they do deployments, they try to get out early in the morning and try to stay a little bit later. But your comments noted, and we'll bring that back to our enforcement team and let them know there is a desire from the community for non-traditional hours that we typically work during the day.
And especially between 12 p.m. 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. when ILWU workers go on their lunch break. There's no kind of enforcement patrol at the Port of Oakland, not even on the streets. There's no one patrolling.
Hi, Miss Margaret. This is Paul Grazzini. I'm the supervisor for the Oakland area now with the Air District. You may remember me from a few years back.
I know you are, Paul. Thank you for reminding me.
So I'll let my inspectors know about the 12 to 1 p.m. Unfortunately, you're right for the after hours enforcement. We have on-call staff available, but they're there for major incidents. And unfortunately, truck idling just doesn't hit that level. But I can speak to the inspectors, my inspectors, about doing patrols from the 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Time frame. So I'll do that.
Great, thanks a bunch. All right, Brian. Oh, you okay? All right, Brian.
Yeah, two questions. One is, what is the nature of follow-up if a resident reports a truck that's idling, smoking, illegally parked or something in their neighborhood on those after hours? So they go to the website, they put in the data, here's the truck, here's the truck company's name, here's the stuff, right? And here's a picture of the truck. What would happen? Does that company get a letter, or does is that evidence good for anything, or is it just go on the list?
So for
then I have one more question.
Oh, sorry.
But go ahead, answer that one first, so we don't
Okay.
get lost.
So for truck idling complaints, if they were submitted on the Cal EPA system, we would either, if we have a CARB staff available on site, refer to them or to the Air District to go to that location if there's a specific address or area where the complainant saw the truck, to inspect it and see if they see the idling trucks. And then if there is contact information available for the complainant, we would follow up by call or by emailing or calling them. And if we do in fact see an idling truck and identify the company or the truck owner, we would then send a citation letter. If we can't, we don't see them, or sorry, we would provide the citation letter in person so that the truck owner can provide proof of compliance once they're done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
What I'm talking about are nights and weekends when you don't have any staff available, because that's when they come in the neighborhood and park, right? They park all weekend in near my house, right?
Yeah.
And then it's not just it's near my house. They know they're going to get a ticket if they're not gone by Monday morning, and so they park there all weekend. Sometimes they run their auxiliary engine, they sleep in their cab, they're doing what they do because that's what truckers do, right? I think this is a key element that's always been a complaint of the community. And somehow we need to work it out if we're going to talk about real enforcement, because the industry knows not to fool around during business hours, because the agencies are out there too. So I hope we can look more deeply at that and how to get that done. My other question is, has CARB reviewed, when we talk about Miss Margaret's comment about trucks lining up and idling at lunchtime, has CARB reviewed the success of the appointment system at the ports? Because what we see is that some terminals have very successful appointment systems and they work pretty good. Other terminals are just using a bogus appointment system to circumvent the idling rule. And so you get lines of trucks sitting for hours, for miles long. And that's been going on for a decade since the appointment system was created. And we don't really see that improving, and neither do the truckers. But if you had trucks lined up for hours a mile long in front of any other facility, they would all be getting tickets. Somebody would be getting a notice of violation, right? But at the port terminals, having an appointment system gives the terminal a waiver. So they have no motivation to get rid of those lines outside the terminal. And I'm just wondering if CARB has any intention of reviewing that process, because it sure doesn't, as far as we're concerned, it's broken. And it doesn't seem to serve the needs of getting rid of lines of trucks.
We'll take one response to that before we move to the next presentation.
Mm,
One of our
Brian,
guests.
Did somebody else from CARB want to jump in? Hi, Brian.
Go
This is
for it.
Mark. I haven't. Well, we are familiar with the port or the appointment system in some of the ports and also rail yards throughout. I don't. It's a good question. Are you like inferring towards maybe like a reg modification or something of that nature where it'd be a requirement?
Yeah, because it's a CARB rule.
Okay.
CARB has a 30-minute rule for port terminals and rail yards. But if you have an appointment system, you get a waiver. This is a CARB rule. It's not the port rule, or So we would like to see CARB review their own rule and see if it's working or not, because it doesn't seem to be achieving the intention, which was to cut the length of these lines. The 30-minute rule would mean you can't have more than about 15 or 20 trucks lined up.
Right.
So we have hundreds of trucks lined up, right?
Yeah. Also, steering committee member Cook would like to know if there's any way to a site to go that you can upload pictures or videos of offenders.
Yeah, the CaliPA complaint system link in that last slide, once you submit, or once you start the complaint, there is a place for you to upload photos and videos along with any details of location and your contact information, all of that.
All right, great. We're going to move to district enforcement measures. And Yu Yang.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Ying Yu, and I'm from the compliance. I'm from the Compliance and Enforcement Division of the Air District. So today I will be presenting to you a compliance update for the West Oakland 8617 community. Along with me here today are my colleagues, Paul Grazzini, who is the area supervisor for the West Oakland community, and Paul Hipser, who is the supervisor in the enforcement operations group. We will have a questions and answers session at the end, so we'll be happy to answer any questions after the presentation. Next slide, please. The Air District commits to reduce emissions in West Oakland with a series of strategies, including enforcement strategies. As a recap, this slide shows the enforcement strategies that were developed in the SERP, which includes updating the complaint program, increasing frequency of inspections at stationary sources, developing outreach material on open burning, providing inspection and complaint summary, enhancing the enforcement referral process, identifying unpermitted sources, and further investigating the impacts of backyard burning. So before going into the details of the compliance update, I'd like to just quickly show a map of the SERP area. This map shows the West Oakland project area, which we're focusing our effort on. It is taken straight from the WOCAP final document. So many of you are probably already very familiar with this, but for those of you who aren't as familiar, I know it's a little difficult to see. This map shows the geographical area of the West Oakland community. The legend on the upper left-hand corner shows, the different elements on the map. So the map shows highway, rail yard, the Port of Oakland, truck-related business, and permitted stationary sources, meaning those that have obtained a permit to operate from the Air District. These sources are shown as the little black dots on the map, and they are scattered throughout the community. Next slide, please. As shown on the list of enforcement strategies on the earlier slide, one of the strategies was updating the air quality complaint program. We updated our air quality complaint program from 2021 to 2022 after hosting 5 public workshops to seek suggestions on the complaint process. And in the updated complaint policy and procedures, which can be found on the complaint webpage at www.baaqmb.gov/complaint, we've made several major enhancements, including providing clarity and additional guidance on the complaint response and investigation process, expanding the inspectors' the ability to confirm complaints, clarifying public nuisance authority. The updated policy and procedures also explains the different types of enforcement actions, addresses confidentiality concerns, and enhances accessibility to information and resources. In addition to the policy itself, we've also added or updated other helpful supplemental documents, such as the complaint brochure, helpful tips document, and emissions log. These documents are available in English, Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Tagalog. In the helpful tips document, we mentioned that one way the community can better help us with the complaint process is by providing more specific description regarding the emissions they observe, whether it's odor, dust, or others. That way, when the inspector does the investigation, they would have a better idea what to look for. We've also launched a new online complaint reporting system that is more streamlined and easier to navigate. So on the right-hand side of the slide is a screenshot of what the current online reporting system looks like. Lastly, we recently posted a video series on the complaint webpage, which explains the complaint process, including how to report a complaint and the entire process of the investigation. So for the public to better understand the complaint process. Next slide, please. Within the West Oakland community, there are approximately 165 permitted facilities. A permitted facility can be as big as Schnitzer Steel, for example, or as small as a gas station. This area includes various types of permitted facilities such as wastewater treatment facility, metal facility, auto body shops, gas station, etc. Our staff have conducted 209 source inspections in the past 2 years. This includes 163 general sources. A general source is any stationary source that has a permit with the air district. It can be a boiler, backup generator, etc. We've also conducted 16 gasoline dispensing facilities inspections and 30 asbestos inspections. During a compliance inspection, our inspectors physically look at the sources and ensure that they are in compliance with all the applicable regulations and permit requirements, which are specific to each facility. They also review records and look for signs of emissions and odors, etc. Inspectors also regularly investigate deviations that occur at Title V facilities. As listed on one of the CERB enforcement strategies, this annual enforcement summary was also reported to CARB. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the complaint data from January 2021 to December 2022. We received a total of 93 complaints during this time period, 39 in 2021 and 54 in 2022. As shown on the graph, odor was the most commonly reported complaint type, as odors generally have a very low detection threshold, and people are usually very sensitive to odors. This is followed by dust, wood smoke, and smoke complaints. Other complaint types such as fire out and asbestos were relatively less commonly reported. Our staff fully investigate each complaint. During the course of the inspector's complaint investigation, if they find something that is out of compliance, the inspector would take appropriate enforcement action, such as a notice of violation issuance, or if there is considerable offsite impact, a public nuisance will be issued. Next slide, please. This map shows the complaints we received in the West Oakland community from 2021 to 2022 based on alleged sites. The pins are color-coded and each color represents a different complaint types. Complaints that did not have a specific alleged site are not shown on the map because the site address was not available. And then on the right-hand side, this table shows the list of the alleged sites that had more than one complaint in the reporting time period. A lot of the complaints did not allege a specific site, indicating that emissions are often fleeting and dissipating very quickly. The second most frequently alleged sites are single-family dwellings with various different addresses. These are usually associated with wood smoke complaints. Our inspectors are trained to investigate each and every complaint fully. We are taking a targeted approach, meaning that inspectors would patrol more frequently in areas that have higher complaint traffic to better address air quality concerns and to ensure facilities are operating in compliance with applicable regulatory requirements. Next slide, please. This slide shows the list of violations that were issued in West Oakland from 2021 to 2022. There were a total of 25 notices of violations issued during this time period. Most of them were issued in 2022 when more businesses resumed normal operation as the pandemic restrictions were easing. And then the middle column shows the site name of the business. The NOV or notice of violation was issued to. Several of these were unpermitted sources that were discovered by inspectors via complaint notification. As mentioned earlier, inspectors are taking the targeted approach to inspect and patrol areas that have had high numbers of complaints or violation events. As for resolution, once the NOV is issued, the inspector documents all the relevant information in the NOV report, which is then submitted to our legal division for review and determination on the final resolution and penalty amount. Next slide, please. We categorized the violations into three main types. Administrative violations are typically associated with record keeping or other administrative reporting requirements. Operational violations are usually emission related. The citations are typically in the 300 sections of the Air District regulations. For example, if a source emits more than a specific emission standard or operates without proper abatement, that would be considered an operational violation. And lastly, if a source is operating without an authority to construct or a permit to operate, that would be a permit violation. In the past, we used to group permit violations in the same category as administrative violations, but we decided now that it makes more sense to have the permit violation as a standalone category. Next slide, please. This slide shows a comparison of the NOV issuance with the baseline time period of 2016 to 2018. In the baseline 3-year period, there were 21 NOVs issued, and most of those NOVs were issued to East Bay Mud and various asbestos companies. In the current time period, which is a 2-year period from 2021 to 2022, our staff have issued 25 NOVs, and the focus is more on identifying unpermitted sources, such as backup generators at cannabis operation businesses. Based on the data, besides Schnitzer Steel, which received NOVs in both the baseline period and the current period, it doesn't appear that any other facilities is having a lot of recurrent violations from year to year. And our staff will continue conducting routine unannounced inspections and take enforcement actions if they find something that is out of compliance. Next slide, please. So beyond routine compliance inspections and complaint investigations, additional enforcement efforts or progress were made to the West Oakland community. In the past 2 years, district enforcement staff has taken multiple enforcement actions with state and local agencies to address emissions from cannabis cultivation sites operating in Oakland. Many of these operations involve unpermitted backup generators and or solvent usage. 5 NOVs were issued and the facilities or generators ultimately shut down. There was also cross-agency collaboration with city and state agencies to address complaints and smoke from fires set in unhoused encampments in West Oakland. This effort also highlights the importance of complaint reporting and how it ties to our enforcement work. Complaints alleging idling trucks also led to our staff conducting surveillance of the Port of Oakland trucking operations and smoking container vessels at the port. Last but not least, staff discovered and issued NOV with the fumigation operations in the port, and the sources are now permitted. Next slide, please. For next steps, we are looking to work with other regulatory agencies and enhance the referral process for mobile sources, illegal cannabis operations, and unhoused encampment fires. We will also continue to work with the community and other agencies on identifying unpermitted sources. We value community input, and based on those input, we will continue conducting targeted inspections on air pollution sources to address those air quality concerns. We're also aware that backyard burning is a big concern, so we will continue to do more patrols in the neighborhood, especially in the winter months when wood burning is more likely. Lastly, we are in the process of building a web page with the NOV issuance information posted. So this way it will make information more accessible. And I believe that web page will be available sometime in the fall or later this year. So next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions now. Thank you.
Did we lose Randolph?
No, we've got a few
okay.
questions. Yeah, no, I'm still here. You can't get rid of me that quick. That easy, rather. We got a few questions in the chat. There's a question around 311, but 311 is a City of Oakland reporting system. And then there was one slide for October inspections. It showed 2 high emission sources, but 0 citations. And can you tell us why there were no citations issues there?
Sorry, could you clarify which emission event is this?
Was that the CARB presentation they were asked that question was about?
I think it was the CARB.
Oh, that was the
presentation,
CARB.
and it was the
Okay.
roadside truck testing, which showed and that answer, it may have been answered in the chat, but maybe you just want to clarify that it was high levels, but then there was no thing issued. So maybe.
Yeah. Hi, this is Warren. I'll go ahead and just address it. The peaks, like you saw in the video, it's a screening tool. It's not an actual method for that's acceptable for non-compliance. So when the peaks flags the vehicle as a potential high emitter or a high emitter, then it's pulled over by our field folks, and then they do further testing on it, and then you do the snap idle test. So they put a mirror on the exhaust, rev the engine, do their measurements, and then if it exceeds, they get a citation. So it's possible the peaks flagged a truck as being higher than normal, but it wasn't enough to warrant a citation. So
Great.
that's the short answer.
We have a few more questions, and we also want to hear from the other steering committee members. Just, like part of the reason why we're doing this, we want to know how the presentations relate to your experiences. So based on what you're hearing, how they relate to your personal experiences, and that sort of thing. And we've got a couple other, let's move to a couple other questions. Brian?
Sure. I had 2 questions. One is, I note that Schnitzer Steel had 2 or 3 violations just in December of last year. And I didn't notice if they were like administrative or what they were, but they're under, they're working under notices of violation from 5 different agencies a couple of years ago. And I would think that they would have their act together. Can you say more about why they are still having violations?
What I can say about it, those violations are emissions related, and I would say that they're also somewhat related to what's happened in the past. It's sort of a ongoing process we have here.
Okay.
unfortunately, I can't, because of all of the different lawsuits and everything that's happening, I can't really expound very much on that. What I can tell you is that we're still enforcing regulations as they are, and the permit as it is. And so when there are permit violations, when there are emissions violations that have been recorded or measured, we're still issuing tickets. And so it's, I guess you could say, we're just piling it on.
Okay, if that's the explanation, I don't have a problem with that. My other question is one that is a perennial question for me. If there are 163 permits issued in West Oakland for people to handle chemicals or have emissions of some kind, does anyone know what the aggregate total potential of all those are? Say there's 100 companies and they're all issued a permit to use 1,000 gallons a year of toluene to wash parts with or something. I think that's 100,000 gallons of toluene being used in West Oakland. But we don't look at that, do we? We only look at that individual company. And this is an aggregate, potential aggregate exposure. But I'll let you answer. My question is, do we know what the aggregate is? Are we looking at what the aggregate of the permits represents relative to potential exposure?
I will
response. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I was gonna just jump in, because I'm enforcement, I don't know that answer. I know that between myself and Alicia, we'll bring it back, and I think it's more than, well, I don't want to promise it. I won't promise it, but
okay.
I will say, I mean, what I can tell you is, so, you know, when a facility, and I'm speaking a little bit for our permit division, you know, when we issue permits, you have, say, we'll use toluene as an example. They'll have a limit in their permit of, say, I'm going to make this up. It's entirely arbitrary. You know, 500 gallons of toluene a year. That's that they cannot exceed. And if they exceed that, my inspectors write them a ticket, and they have to do something with their operation, or they have to get below that limit, or put extra controls on, or something of that nature. In a lot of cases, the companies aren't not always hitting those limits. So they might be permitted for 500 gallons and they might only be using 250. So there's sort of two numbers that exist in the world of air pollution. One is the potential to emit, right? And there's that aggregate number. What is the aggregate of the potential to emit? And then there's, you know, what is the actual number? And the actual number may be something that, you know, it's something we can review after the fact, because it's based on use, and it's also something that we can track, whether it's increasing, decreasing, and that I'll also be a little bit candid. That can follow whatever the economy is doing at the time. You can see increases and decreases based on those things. But you know, I think I'll take it back, and we'll see. We'll see what
it's okay. I've been asking this question for 14 years, Paul, so it's all right, you know.
I can jump into another Paul from enforcement, not to confuse with the Paul G. But I mean, we do have an emissions inventory group, and so I think we can get that information to you, or maybe at the next presentation or something like that. I believe they can calculate the emissions from all the sources in those areas, but it would be something we have to bring back to that group and figure out if they can do that. So
yeah, so I mean, it'd be useful to know, because I mean, if it isn't commonly known in the agency, then it seems like it ought to be, right?
Yeah.
And so, because you could have a paint shop, an auto shop, a machine shop, and, you know, side by side with with resident properties on the backside of that block, which is what we have in West Oakland, they could all be permitted for 500 gallons a year. And if they're dumping it in wash tanks or something, I don't know how that's controlled. You know, I don't know how vapors are controlled or how any of that works. So, but it feels like there's a potential for an aggregate exposure that we're not actually calculating. When we have a community that is, you know, cheek to jowl with industrial uses and residential uses. And when we wonder why people have so many odor complaints, it's like they smell stuff and no one can figure out what it is, right? But it's because they live next to some kind of industrial site in a warehouse and no one knows what's going on. So this seems like, you know, not just a complaint, but an important bit of data that we should have available to us, right?
And
Thank
we've got, and
Thanks
we're
a lot.
running a little bit over time, but we want to get your questions answered regarding this section. So we've got Ray, Miss Margaret, Hannah, and Brent is in there somewhere. So if we could get through those, that would be great.
Is that me?
Yep, you're up,
Okay.
Ray.
All right, thanks, man. I appreciate the presentation. I have a couple of questions about inspection and then CAS. You said you had something 90 odd complaints. Does each of those complaints trigger an inspection? And regarding inspections as well, are the inspections that you have increased the frequency of, are those inspections prearranged with the site of the inspections, or do you ever do unannounced inspections? And then I also have a question about CAS.
Okay, I'll field those. So a complaint, if a complaint takes us to or if it's alleging a particular facility, or if in the investigation it leads us to a particular facility, or if even we think that the most likely source would be a particular facility, the inspectors will go to that facility and do a cursory investigation, basically a walkthrough, see what's going on, see if they can experience whether it's odor, dust, and trace it to a particular specific piece of equipment or source at the facility. So that happens. That process is part of every complaint investigation. It gets a little bit tougher when there's, when it's a fleeting odor, but still, if we have reason to believe that it's a particular facility, we'll still go in there. We may review their records or ask for some operational information just to see if we can get a correlation. It may not lead to an enforcement action, but it's at least trying to do our best to follow up to get somewhere. You had another question about the inspection. All of our inspections are essentially unannounced. There are occasions when security or access is an issue where we'll contact the facility ahead of time. To my knowledge, there's no facility in West Oakland that we cannot do, and we do unannounced. Everything in West Oakland we will do unannounced. From the standpoint that one, that's what EPA really wants us to do. It's it's pretty much a requirement. And two, it's what gives us the best snapshot of what's happening right now. So that's my direction to my inspectors. Everything's unannounced, the exceptions being when either access or safety is an issue.
Thanks.
Okay, well, the inspections then will probably be, going back to what Ms. Margaret was saying, during sort of regular business hours, because coming back to CAS, many of the CAS complaints historically have been later in the evening at night, because that's when they run their furnaces, their metal melting furnaces that produce a lot of the fumes that are sometimes mitigated, sometimes not. So am I correct in saying that the inspection will be sort of like during business hours? And can you say what there was one notice of violation for CAS. Can you say if that violation was in regard to its recycling operation or to its three metal melting furnaces?
I can't speak to that. right now. Give me 3 minutes and I'll have an answer for you.
Okay, let's move, like if you could, and then
Yeah.
let's move through these last questions. Miss Margaret?
Yes, my last question is, why is that none of these agencies have a seal of approval, just like the health department of inspections or for inspections of these facilities? So how, because we don't know, we have no knowledge of the level of your inspection. And then also, I just see here in the chat, it says Cal EPA complaint system is faster and more efficient way to track responsible and references to follow up on air quality complaints. But we've been working with CARB and Bay Area Air Quality, and this is the first time I have ever heard that there was a complaint system for Cal EPA. So where is the joint enforcement on a lot of the stuff that should be based in AB 617?
Got more than you bargained for, huh, Paul?
Yeah, I'll do my best here, Miss Margaret. What I can tell you is, so the CARB, the Cal EPA complaint, that's how the state kind of funnels it. I'm sort of speaking for them, and I probably shouldn't, but that's okay. That's how they funnel their complaint system. What I can tell you is, in the last year, especially in the last year in particular, there has been a lot more collaboration, specifically in the West Oakland area, in Oakland in general, but in the West Oakland area and specifically, there's been a lot more collaboration between the Air District, CARB, DTSC, I know I'm leaving an agency out of there, but also the City of Oakland's Code Enforcement Division. My inspectors now we have direct contacts to our counterparts with the City of Oakland, so that when they see issues that pertain to our jurisdiction and when we see issues that pertain to theirs, we can contact each other directly. And I can say in the last year, there have been more than several. There've been a good handful of joint inspections that have taken place among agencies. Mostly this is involved the City of Oakland and the state's Department of Cannabis Control, with issues that have come up with that industry, and also have pertained to some air pollution issues. But what I can tell you is, I know we're not there yet, but we're getting better, and we are trying. Those of us who are involved, we really are trying. I think the bureaucracy gets in the way sometimes, and we're doing our best just to try and, and I know that falls short of expectations, but just know that we are giving it a good effort. We're trying.
Great, thanks, Paul. And we're gonna take Hannah.
Oh, hello. I just wanted to, I didn't know that we weren't doing aggregate measurements. So I'm really glad that Brian brought that up, but it's hard to believe that he's bringing it up for 14 years. So I do hope that this is the year that we can move forward on that with getting more information.
Great, thanks. And let's close this out, Brent.
Hey, thank you. I had two questions. One was pertinent to this broader discussion, which was whether CARB and or other affiliates could bring innovative strategies to West Oakland around truck management and other issues. I think one thing we've been looking into is the ability to use cameras or imagery to sort of map where trucks are. And if CARB could bring any interesting information or ideas or strategies in that perspective. My other question was to the presenter earlier, who was saying that homeless encampments were a major issue around air impacts. And I was just curious to get some more information eventually as far as like what the relative impact of those homeless encampments are to the air quality impacts, and then what strategies we might work towards to improve those issues.
Does somebody want to take that? On the homeless encampments? Whose presentation was that in?
That was
Was
mine.
that, that was Ying?
Yeah, so for the unhoused encampment fires, our inspectors usually we discover those via complaint notification, and sometimes the complaint initially might be alleging a different facility instead of saying it's like a encampment fire. But through the investigation, that's what our inspector discovered, that the actual source was from the fire. So we've been working closely with other agencies such as the Oakland Fire Department and the police department to address these issues.
Great. And actually, we're gonna move it. If there's another answer to Brent's first question, maybe we can get that. But we want to give Alicia her full time, and then we do want to hear. So we're going to be over a few minutes, but we do want to hear from the steering committee and get some of your input and feedback on the presentation. So let's move now to Alicia.
Great, thank you. And I would just, put a plug in for that last comment about, the coordination among the agencies, and, is there a role for the steering committee in trying to, kind of push that a little more? Can we apply pressure in some way? So I think, maybe that's something to think about, and maybe we can talk about that at a future time. So I am, yes, thanks, going to give you a very, very short presentation about some of the data that came from Oakland. And I want to preface it by saying, obviously, that I do not work at the city of Oakland, but that we have code enforcement data related to land use complaints. We have heavy duty truck parking ticket information, and we have collisions involving trucks. And we have this data because we have relationships with those divisions. As Paul was saying, I think that, we are, the coordination is getting better, but it's not great, and we still have room for improvement. And so I would also just like to say that this is the first time that we have shared this kind of level of data with the steering committee. And so aside from that, the actual plan being prepared. And so we want to kind of, hear from you. How is it resonating with you? How does it, feel to kind of receive all this information in one night? What questions and what next steps do you see? But I would also like to say that the reason I am presenting this is because although the city was very, collaborative and in giving us that their data and their information, they are experiencing significant staff shortages, and so they're not able to be here tonight to kind of field the questions. And so I probably have answers to many of your questions. And the other question, I think this kind of applies across all of those presentations, is that we're still learning and we're still experimenting with how we can use this data to create the change in the improvements that we want to see. So kind of the next question would be, what do the feedback loops look like? So when we bring something like this to community, when we bring this enforcement information to community, how do we, kind of ensure that the comments are getting back to the various agencies, and that there is follow up from there? Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So the first slide here is just understanding enforcement authority. And so in terms of a city jurisdiction, so you have the public right of way, which is the street, and you have people or trucks operating and trucks traveling on the street, and the enforcement for traffic violations is through Oakland Police Department. And then you have the authority for enforcing the truck parking rules and truck routes, and that's the Department of Transportation. And then you shift, and on the right side of the screen, you have kind of the private property, and that is enforced through the Code Enforcement Services Division of the Oakland Planning and Building Department. So I think the other note here, the nugget here, is that there's a lot of agencies, as we're hearing tonight, there's a lot of agencies involved in enforcement. And so I think it is a fair point to say, how can they be more coordinated, and how can they also share out on the activities that are happening? Next slide. So jumping into the data. So for code enforcement, we have the data on the screen that was kind of queried for the last year. And there's a link to the actual spreadsheet of the data. And the data ranges from either resolved, so they were all complaints and they were either abated or resolved, or their notices of violation were mailed. And I attempted to kind of categorize the types of complaints that were received into permitted, unpermitted recycling businesses. There was complaints around truck parking and loading and heavy equipment operating. And then there were truck parking and on vacant lots. Next slide, please. And then for the heavy duty truck parking ticket data, there are about 9 tickets issued in West Oakland over the last year. And so, the addresses are there and the tickets are shown. Next slide, please. And then there were about 7 collisions involving heavy duty trucks, and you have the intersections there. And so as we, as we kind of move forward into the future meetings around truck management, around this potential STEP grant that the city is working on, we can kind of think about, when we have this information in the back of our mind, where the trucks are receiving truck parking tickets, and where are the collisions happening, and how can we I think, as Brett mentioned earlier, how can we take this information and kind of modify or enhance our strategies, as he mentioned, around the unhoused population. So that is I have one more slide, which is the how to report violations, and these are certainly around truck violations, but it also has the code enforcement for permitted businesses. So that is the presentation. Thank you.
Wow, that was great. Got through that pretty swiftly. Let's get a few questions in relative to this. And then again, we're going to go back to the steering committee, get any other comments. Ms. Albertia.
Hi, thank you for the presentations. They were very informative and a lot of information to try to retain. But I do want to go back to most of the slides, and I noticed that the slides are only showing 2 zip codes, 07 and 08. I'm in West Oakland, but I don't happen to be a part of those zip codes. So I'd like to know if there's a way to increase the area of truck parking to be assimilated, into the numbers, because I don't think that that's giving the big picture when you leave out certain areas of West Oakland. That's just a comment. And also, I need to look at the code permit, because there's a place right directly across from me. It used to belong to mostly Mustangs. They moved down to San Pablo, but they kept the building. The building doesn't have a name on it nor a number, but it's operating. And so I don't know if they're operating under the law. I don't know what they're doing, but about right before COVID hit, there was a bomb squad over there in full hazard, and they weren't warning the neighbors. They just doing what they're doing. And that was kind of unsettling to me, because I came home to that and I had to get in my house and immediately they didn't tell me, I immediately got out of the area. And there was never any communications with with any of the residents on the streets. But at the end, they were bringing out barrels and barrels of whatever containers they had in that building. And the building is still in use. And this guy is coming and going. And I think it has something to do with the cars. I don't know if they're still affiliated with Mostly Mustangs. But anyway, I can't give an address. I can only tell where it is because it's never really been an address on the building. So I'll look at the stuff for code compliance and permits. Is that where I should go?
Yes.
And Ms. Alberta, what zip are you? 609?
No, I'm in 12.
Oh, you're 612. Okay.
Yeah, I'm in 12.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's right here where 98024 and
right. Gotcha. That's that one little piece of 1, 2.
That's a nice chunk of stuff happens over in here.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? We would like to hear from other steering committee members. Again, we're really trying to figure out, you know, kind of how what you've heard in the presentation, kind of, you know, kind of how does it relate to your personal experience? There was a question before. Has anybody actually tried to make a complaint? Have they tried calling enforcement, and how did that go? Was it resolved? No?
That would be a no for me.
Okay, well, we should give that a try. There are, you know, again, in that enforcement one pager, all of the contact information to make a complaint for all the different kinds of violations are there. And so there's no lack of effort to you know, kind of make a solution available to you. Any other comments? Again, from the steering committee, any other thoughts from you? What we're trying to figure out is, what does a meaningful enforcement strategy, and what would be valuable in terms of enforcement data, because you are, you know, the advisory committee for the WOCAP. We want to hear from you. We also want to know how, you know, can the community partner better with agency enforcement staff. So can we hear from any other steering committee members? Or should I call on someone? Okay, it's on you, Albertia. We can't, I think you may be on mute.
Okay,
You're speaking for your colleagues.
Okay, well, one of the things, the reason I mentioned that, I noticed that 12 is left out because we used to have a whole lot of vehicles, but the homeless encampments kind of pushed them out because there's no place for them to park and there's no place for us to even walk. So that's a whole another issue. But prior to the encampments just evolving in the way that they have, it kind of minimized the number of trucks that were parking in our area. But you still find them here and there, you know, because, you know, like I said, the unhoused are using the underpasses and all of that. So it kind of moves them out of the way. But I'm learning things. I'm still pretty new at this, but you know, I have complained about certain things before, but this is before all of this with code compliance and things like that. And I guess I have to just learn the rules of when and where and why I would make a complaint. And I didn't know that you can make a complaint about the odor from the cannabis businesses, because you can just walk down the street or you know, well, not over here so much, but there are other areas you could just, even downtown, all over, you smell it, you just don't know where it's coming from, but you know they're around where they're growing. I don't know if they're using or whatever, but I didn't know that that was something that you could make a complaint.
And we made a flyer for you, just so you can find the number quickly. And and Bridget must have known I was about to call on her. I was going to call on either you or Jimmy as West Oakland residents. Bridget, and then Beth, and then we'll close it out.
Okay.
Gee, thanks, Randolph. So my question, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So my question was actually more in regards to construction, 1 and 2, just existing buildings that may have issues. I'm thinking particularly, and I'm here as a member of True Vine Ministries there, which is off of West Rand. So of course, there's a lot of traffic and issues that happen along that corridor. So I'm wondering in particular in regards to complaints about what happens during construction projects, dust and things of that nature. I know there's complaints that's supposed to go to building and planning, but do either of these agencies address when there's issues in regards to that level of dust?
Somebody want to take that?
Sure, I can take it from.
Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, we take dust complaints from construction sites. Also, if there's like asbestos type, you know, if it's like a remodel or demolition type job and stuff like that, and there's suspect of maybe asbestos being in there, we also take those complaints at the air district. So.
Okay, great. And
I'm sorry, can I ask one last question, Randall? And maybe this is something that's been already addressed, or we can talk about it for future. How do community members know that these are available, particularly when it comes to these construction projects? Because it's not like that information is distributed by the city. So just as we start talking about these problems, you know, how we're going to address this going forward, I think communications and making sure that the neighbors are aware of who does what and how to get in contact with them is going to be real critical information.
We may have to add that to our one pager. Yes. Got you covered, Bridget.
Thank you, Bridget. That's a great idea. Yeah.
All right. Oh, okay. If there are no other, we're going to have Beth close us out. But you have to be off mute to do that.
I just wanted to pose a question that I think people can think about, which is, what other resources do you all need to feel confident in making complaints, whether it's, you know, edits to the flyer or other examples or things like that. And we don't need to talk about it now because I'm sure everyone wants to, you know, get to their evening, but you know, if people want to share now or email us, we would love to help.
Yeah, and one of the times that I posted the link to the one pager, there is a section on resources, and I asked if there is any other resources that you might find valuable to have on this. Because right now it's just, I think there's one on the peaks, and then there's a, you know, we always try and link you back to the WOCAP document. But if there are any other kind of resources that you might find valuable to, or you think somebody else might find valuable to have on this one pager, please send those back. So any other thoughts on enforcement, what you need, what we can do, what we can find for you?
I guess I would just add, for the agencies who are represented here tonight, if there's any, coordination role that you see, so I think there's kind of like certain, takeaways for residents, and then, but maybe, what is that takeaway and what is that follow up for agencies related to enforcement? And maybe it's nothing, maybe it's not related, but I just kind of like, as Beth left you with, like, are there any other materials, and Randolph have, asked if you, are there any other thing that you would need in order to feel comfortable in this space? I would pose that to the agencies who are here and who are on the steering committee. Is there anything, related to enforcement and related to interagency coordination that you can see as being important or helpful, or, just something to explore?
All right, Tamara.
Yes, I just wanted to know, how can I get a copy of this recording? I joined late.
Oh, that will be on the website. That'll
Okay.
be on the West Oakland Environmental Indicators website, along with the summary.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
I'll drop the link in the chat, but it's woke.org/steering.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
Great. So there has been an incredible amount of information, and we got in. I didn't want to cut off any questions, right, or answers, and so that's why we're a little bit over. But again, incredible amount of information and resources shared. Thanks to all of our presenters tonight. Did an incredible job. And we will see you next.
Before you close out, Randolph, there's a couple of things that as part of next steps. We need a mass outreach to West Oakland within the zip code about this enforcement. We need some billboards. The agencies in the city need to be putting up some billboards about this enforcement issue, and also we need to be distributing to all the schools, the stores, about having some form of billboards or placards or something about this enforcement issue. We have nothing.
Gotcha.
I know we got the one pager, but I think it got to be a much more mass media, feet on the street type situation.
All right. You've just agendized our next small group outreach meeting. I'll see you this week on that.
All right.
All right, all. Thanks for staying a little long. Really appreciate your input. If you have any thing that you want to share, you can send it over to West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. Again, thanks to all of our presenters, and we're gonna sign off.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Everybody.
Okay.
Good meeting.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.